Welcome to the Big Life Podcast, where dreams aren't just imagined, they're built brick by brick, belief by belief. Hosted by Neal Oates Jr. and Robin Lewis, this show is your invitation to discover your amazing capabilities, invest in your growth, and unleash your potential in ways you've only dreamed of. Join Neal and Robin as they dive deep into stories, insights, and tools designed to inspire you to show up big, live intentionally, and give yourself away for the betterment of those around you. Get ready to rise to what you're truly worthy of. The Big Life starts now.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Big Life Podcast. Neal Oates Jr., Robin Lewis. Hello.
Hey, Neal, what's going on, my friend?
A lot and nothing at the same time. It is a fantastic day, beautiful weather here in South Florida. What do you think?
Oh, man, another beautiful day, sir. One of the things I want to catch you off guard here. One of the things I want to ask you is, how's the book going?
The book is going better. And here's what's wild. I'm glad you asked that question. I believe that I'm an ambitious person. I believe that I set goals and benchmarks, and I'm always like, I believe it's possible. Let's go after it. But it's going better than I expected. It's going better than the publisher expected. And so I will tell you that it is humbling. Right. And so, as you know, me being what I call a man of action, I never thought that me taking action would yield the results that it has in terms of connecting with people. Right. And so thank you for asking. It is going very well. We're praying for continued success and continued impact.
Amen.
That has been the goal, just like with the Big Life Podcast. And so I am pleased to say that we're on a very good trajectory.
Man, it's like, you say, you know the saying, you know it was going to happen anyway. And so congratulations to you, sir. Thank you. And I'm proud of you.
And I appreciate that. And so, speaking of books, we are going to dive into High Road Leadership by John C. Maxwell.
Yes.
And today, Robin, we are talking about an unsexy, boring, but necessary topic. And so I'm hoping that our audience of leaders and readers are going to dive in here with us. And this is develop emotional capacity.
Yes.
And so anytime we start talking about emotions and leadership, and then we think, well, some of us are thinking about our homes or our families. Some of us are thinking about the emotions from the workplace. But here's how Dr. Maxwell starts the chapter out on develop emotional capacity. Leading people today is difficult. That's the entire chapter right there. We just stop, nothing more. But then he goes a little further. And I think this is where I would love for you to jump in, Robin, because so many of our listeners, we might be aware of this, but we've forgotten it. And people are struggling emotionally. And he talks about from the pandemic and even still today, people are struggling emotionally. And he goes on to say, many people want to opt out, right? Opt out of everything, of life, of leadership, of familial responsibilities, of the pressures that they're having. So before we go any further, leading people today is difficult. People are struggling emotionally, and many people want to opt out. Robin, that's a lot in 3 phrases. Give me something. Let's go.
Yeah, and he goes on to say there that often the emotional struggle causes people to be fragile and to engage in dysfunctional behaviors.
Yes, sir.
And that's what we have to be careful of, which means dysfunctional behaviors means thinking and actions are by definition characterized by abnormal or unhealthy interpersonal behaviors or interaction. And so that's what we're dealing with as leaders. He has a quoting there, Neal, according to the National Alliance on Mental Illness, depression is the leading cause of disability worldwide. And he talked about in the US alone that costing some $1 trillion. It's a sad place when you really think about it. How many we hear now of people, especially younger people, struggling with depression and wanting to do things to harm themselves. And in the workplace, if people are fragile and dysfunctional, it affects interaction. It affects the interpersonal relationships that we have. If you're a leader, people are dependent upon you to help them and to bring improvement in their situations and in their lives. And as a leader, we must learn to weather the storms and make hard decisions and
So,
to
Robin,
lead
hold
people to
on
a
right
better
there,
place.
right? Because you just mentioned that people are going through all of this stuff, and we know that if there's something in here, we don't walk out the door and leave it on our dresser. We're bringing it to the workplace with us. We're bringing it to our Zoom rooms. We're bringing it to our Microsoft Teams, to our interaction with customers, clients, and prospects, with our kids. But you're telling me that as a leader, two things. First, I'm dealing with my own stuff, right? But then because of my position and responsibility, and it might notice I did not say title, because of my position and responsibility, I'm dealing with my stuff. But now I have to deal with the stuff of those that I'm leading. And Robin, here's what I want to ask you. We do not have, many of us do not have formal training in emotional capacity and emotional preparedness. So we're trying to learn and figure this thing out. And we say we're not psychiatrists or psychologists, but we're still having to do some of that emotional work as leaders. Where do we start?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I love the way John Maxwell, as he does so very well, he breaks it down. I think, he breaks it down to resilience. He breaks it down to then. So because of this, that we have to develop our capacity to be able to deal with high pressure jobs and deal with adversity and deal with difficulty and deal with difficult people. So we have to develop. So this is an area of the I in the big, and that's to invest to improve. And so what we're suggesting here today to our listeners that we have to do, Neal and I have to do, and all of us as leaders have to do, is we have to develop, we have to grow our emotional capacity. And we're going to share some practical things to help us to do that today. The good news is that we can develop our emotional capacity. There are some practical things that we're going to share. I mean, one thing that I want to do is just share from the book what he talks about when he describes emotional capacity. Is that okay,
I would
Neal?
love that. Yes, I would absolutely love that. But before you do that, I want you to reiterate, you said that we can grow and develop. I know you are a big believer in people. So even before you give this definition, despite my upbringing, the challenges that I have, my experiences so far, how I'm feeling right now, you're confident that no matter who I am, that I can develop, I can improve and increase my emotional capacity, correct?
Man, when you say it that way, it almost brings tears to my eyes because, yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. And I want to look into the camera here today to somebody that might be watching and not just listening. But what we are saying is that you have it within you. That's exactly,
Yeah.
one of the reasons why we do what we do on this podcast is because we believe that about you. See, I believe that it doesn't matter where you were born, what you were born into, the circumstances. Yes, those things do affect us, but they don't define what you are made of. They don't define the champion that's inside of you, the greatness that's inside of you. And you have it. And yes, it needs to be developed. And yes, there's a lot of things that will now need to come into play in order for you to pull that out. I like to say, Neal, I introduce people to their DNA to discover, to nurture and activate the champion that's inside.
I
But we
like that.
believe 100% wholeheartedly that the champion is there.
All
So
right, good
thank you
stuff.
for that question and allowing me to get off on my high horse here, sir. But
No,
yes,
because here's why.
100%.
We need to be reminded that even when we don't believe in ourselves, and I know you and I have both been in those positions, that just hearing a word, any word from anyone that is going to encourage and spark that belief in us is important. And now that we believe that development of emotional capacity is possible, now I'm ready Tell me what this thing is. I know I can do it, but I don't know what I'm doing. So when you're talking about developing emotional capacity, would you just share with us Dr. Maxwell's definition of emotional capacity, sir?
Yes. So what we're talking about here is the ability to respond to adversity, failure, criticism, and pressure in positive ways. I'm going to just say it again one more time. It's the ability to respond to adversity, failure, criticism, and pressure in a positive way. So we're going to have those things. Huh? Let's say it.
None of those are fun, Rob. None of
Exactly.
those are enjoyable.
Yes. So we're going to have them, folks, that's the point. Like sometimes, there are people, there are family members that will say to me that, hey, you got it easy, man. That's why you're where you are. You have it, you have it made in the shade. Or they might say that about somebody over here that they see from a distance. And, you got it made in the shade. You don't have the life that I have. And the reality is we all face adversity. Neal, something that you and I and the people that are listening to us, if they're listening to us in this time period, I'm hoping that this podcast lives on, and 50 years from now and 100 years from now, they're still listening. So you never know. But those of us who are a part, when this is being done, this particular recording is being done in the year 2025. It just came through COVID. I mean, what a major adversity, tragedy, difficulty, disruption that we've been through, right? And life is comes with adversity and failure and criticism and pressure. And so emotional capacity is the ability to respond to those in positive ways.
So, Robin, I want to say, and this is not making light of anything that came from the pandemic, but I can tell you my emotional capacity allowed my wife and I, our relationship to be better because we responded positively to the lock-in. We responded positively to not being able to go out and do things. And wow, we know that the pandemic was a very challenging time for millions of people. For us, it's when we found clarity, and it's when we found a sense of unity. It's when parts of my business actually improved. And it's not because there was no adversity. It's not because there weren't challenges. It's because I recognized, and then with the help of a lot of people, mentors, coaches, advisors, we just made sure that we handled the pressure in a positive way. Now, here's what I would love for you to begin with us and the audience, the listeners, the viewers. I want you to start these practical ways. Take us on this journey because it all sounds almost too good to be true. You not knowing me, not knowing what I've been through, not knowing where I am or the thoughts I have in my head, right? I'm pretty sure you're going to tell me that I have to go on some spiritual journey, that I have to climb to a mountain, that I have to meditate, that I have to pay an exorbitant amount of money. But you said practical ways. So talk to us. What are some of those practical ways that maybe we do physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually to improve and increase our emotional capacity?
Yes, sir. And let's jump in and just to reiterate for leaders, like they use the pandemic as an example. There was a time there where if you were leading people at that time, let's say at a company, an organization, a nonprofit, you had to deal with a lot of emotional struggle and difficulty that we went through as a society. So you know exactly what we're talking about, where you stood up, like Neal just said. He led well. He dealt with that well, and some didn't. And that's what we're talking about here. And as we go through, sometimes there's going to be internal conflict. Sometimes there's going to be adversity at the company. It's not a pandemic. It could just be a conflict that's happening, or it could be the company not doing well, or a bad situation with a client. And we need to be able to demonstrate the emotional strength in the difficult times. And so we need to lead and manage our emotions well. I'm just reiterating that. And the good news is that we can make the choices that would reduce unneeded stress in our lives, and we can develop that capacity and increase the ability that we have to work under pressure. That's the good news, folks. So the bad news is that as leaders, we need to do that. because that's what was going to be
Not
expected of
optional.
us. Yes, but the good news is that we can develop that. And like anything else, it's going to take effort and work, and we're not going to be right on all the time. As we prepared and studied to share with you today, I know that for myself, it exposed to me some things that I need to work on. So here are some practical things that we can do. First of all, refuse to see yourself as a victim.
You're taking away all my excuses with number one, Robin. Come on, but woe is me. And I say that jokingly, but I say it jokingly so I don't cry, right? So the whole idea laugh to keep from crying. You're telling me right off the bat, number one is number one. Refuse to see myself as a victim. I'm interested to see what you have to say. Come on.
Yeah, I think the key here is to take responsibility for our life. It's not what happens. You have scenarios where you have the pandemic. Let's use that as an example. You have the pandemic where people were in the same field. Like I think about restaurants, right? Restaurants got affected in a major way, right? A lot of restaurants aren't around today. Big names that we knew are no longer around because of the pandemic. And yet you have some restaurants that they did some creative things. And I think of this one, for example, that what they did was they found a way to bring food to the people that were serving at like hospitals, first responders. And they got the community involved in support of that. And so, they found a way to get people engaged and to find a way to try and still keep their people and to find a way to continue to make the business go on. And they're the ones that thrive through that situation. And they didn't count themselves as a victim of that. Now, hey, that was a very difficult situation for restaurants, right? And all the different areas where don't care what you did, people couldn't come to your place to do business. And that's the only way they could do business, right? Hotels, cruise ships, airlines. They're very easy to call yourself a victim. And the ones who survived and did better are the ones who took responsibility to find a way to make things happen. And I think that's what we're talking about here.
So, Robin, I want to ask you because Dr. Maxwell says that what you just mentioned, take responsibility for your life, is the first and most important step. Why is that? Not only the first step, right? But why is that so important for us as leaders, right? As we're trying to develop emotional capacity, why is the take responsibility that important?
Well, because if we don't take responsibility, then we're not going to find the way to go. We're not going to find the answers. If we don't take responsibility for our lives, then we're going to be subject to whatever happens, and we're going to blame it on whatever happens. And with that sort of perspective or frame of mind, we're going to wear ourselves out. We won't have the capacity to be able to actually, that is needed to be resilient.
So I want to say that in the book, in this section, when Dr. Maxwell talks about take responsibility for your life,
Yes.
he gives us some specific areas that he is focused on and concentrated on: his attitude, time, priorities, potential, passion, and calling.
Yeah.
I know for you and I, calling is a big part of our life, why we're here on the Big Life podcast. But if you had to choose one of those remaining areas that Dr. Maxwell has chosen to really focus on: attitude, time, priorities, potential, or passion, which one jumps out at you? I'm just asking this question because I'm sure the audience, or at least Neal, wants to know.
Well, it's funny. I highlighted them all, first of all. But if I had to choose one, I would think attitude. I think perspective. Our
Same here.
perspective on things is very big, because how you see things, how you view things is how you do things. And, if you change the way you view things, if you change the way you see things, then the things that you see change. So I think the attitude is not the only thing, but I think it's one of the major ones. But I really could talk about them all. Priorities has been a struggle of mine. We're all busy people, and so it's very easy for us to get lost in that and be the victim of that. And so choosing where we spend our time and so how we spend our time and so on is so important too. But anyway, I'm choosing one, and I would choose attitude. How about you?
I'm in good company because that's the one that I would choose as well. Making sure that if I can get this right, I believe that is such a big part. Of course, I know for us that calling, if we focus on our calling, get our attitude right, I believe the rest of them fall in line.
Yeah.
But you were talking about taking responsibility for ourselves, like Dr. Maxwell did, and then you mentioned the thing about perspective. And as we go a little further, he talks about the perspective and what we focus on. And so I would love for you to share with our audience about don't build your life around your troubles, right? Because I think this is a big part of us not being the victim and taking responsibility for our lives. Don't build your life around your troubles. I would like for you to share.
Yeah, I think, what you focus on expands. Oftentimes,
Hold on.
when
So are you telling me that if and we're talking, Robin is talking to Neal right now, if I have an area in my life that is expanding and it is expanding in the wrong direction, if it's a negative thing, it's probably not the world's fault. It's probably not my wife's fault or my son. My economy might be my focus.
Yeah, Neil, whenever these things always bring experiences to the forefront of my life. I can tell you, it took me years to actually see this in something that I was doing. But I owned an insurance agency for 30 years, and there was a time, this is many years ago, where our business was declining. It was lack of leadership. It was poor leadership on my part. I was a good insurance agent, but that didn't automatically transfer into being a good leader and a good business owner. And this is why, by the way, I feel qualified to help people like that, with leadership and business owners. But
Because you learned from your experiences, right?
yes, yes, I went through the struggle. But I want to try and make the long story short. There was a time where the business outgrew me, and we were getting customers in, and I didn't have the right team together. I didn't have the right processes in place. I didn't have the wherewithal to be able to handle all that was coming in. And it got to a point where I had people calling me and saying things like, "Hey, Robin, we put in a request for a quote, and it's been 3 days now, and we haven't heard from anybody. What's going on over there?" And the long story short, Need, is I had to pull back because literally we weren't handling the business well. What caused us to grow? No, we weren't doing it consistently well anymore. And so I had to pull back. I literally had to kind of pull back from trying to bring business in. And that's when I invested in our first manager. And that's when I invested in a system, our data, agency management system, and started invested in systems and so on. And here's the long story short. The focus became on trying to not lose business. And there was a shift in my mindset where I was focused on, for many years now, shoring things up and not losing business. And what I didn't realize that I was doing, Neil, is that I was no longer focusing. This is after putting all these things into place now, but my focus was still there. Not conserving, not losing business, right? Conserving business, not losing clients. And one day it hit me that I've lost the focus on growing the business, gaining new clients, and growth. And what was happening, Neil, is exactly what I was focusing on was what was continuing to happen. Is that we were losing ground. And it's because that's where I was placing my focus. And I was placing my focus there because I didn't want the same thing that happened years ago to happen again. But I was focusing on the wrong place. And what I needed to do was to focus on growth. Yes, you want to take care and serve people well, that you don't lose people and people stay with you, but you don't want to take the focus off of growing. And so that's an example where I was focusing on our struggles and where we messed up, and we don't want to lose customers. That's exactly what continued to happen.
Yeah, and so Dr. Maxwell, he mentions this when he says, while I have my share of problems, I don't let them hold me back. My focus is on solutions and moving forward. And so this brings me from the sports side of things, where you can see teams, coaches, organizations, where their focus, their goal moves from trying to win to trying not to lose, right? And it sounds to the untrained ear like the same thing, but it is not. So we can either be defensive or offensive. And so that is important. But something I did hear you say, and I will commend you on, is that you did exactly as John Maxwell mentioned when it comes to developing emotional capacity, and that is to make action your priority. And here's what it says in the book: don't rationalize or defend why you must live with certain issues. Don't complain about what you permit. Ouch, that hurt Neal. Instead, do something about it. So I would like to hear, or I would like for you to share with the audience, because we're walking them through these practical steps they can do. When it says instead, do something about it, those things, those troubles, those places where we find ourselves,
Yeah.
how do we move to taking action and making that a priority?
Yeah, we just take action. I think that's the point there, is we act our way into feeling, right? Action comes first and then the emotions follow. And so I think the key that he's sharing there is to take action. When I found myself in that position where I finally discovered that my focus was in the wrong place, what I needed to do and what I did was I started focusing now on growing. And so I went back to how I was before in the first place, man. And that is growth. How are we going? And I started going back out there and focusing on growth. And I kept the focus of, conserving and servicing, but I put the main focus on growing as well. It doesn't matter what you do, you're going to lose some ground, right? Because people die, people move away, things happen. And so if you're not focused on growth, so I took action steps to help me to start winning new business out there again, right? And I think the key there is, the simplified key there is to, as we take action, then things happen. So just like we can see where your focus goes, your energy flows, the direction that you're going in also brings energy with it. And so taking action in the direction that so I had a mentor that used to always say, what's the one step that you can take that if you take it, it's going to move you in the direction of your goals and dreams. And then whenever you figure that out, you take the action. So the idea there is to take the action, figure out what needs to be done, and then just do it.
And so one action that I would encourage everyone to take is to take the action of expressing gratitude. And some of it is gratitude for the lessons learned and the headaches and the knuckleheads we've had to deal with. So for me, expressing gratitude in a practical sense starts with the very first words uttered out of my mouth when my wife and I wake up in the morning. We don't say, hey, I love you. So the very first words every morning that I am blessed to wake up, I say, thank you, God. Right? That's the very first thing that I say. That's what my wife says. And then after that, we can get to the other things. But as we talk about this emotional capacity, what impact does expressing gratitude have, and why should we do it? Right? I know that I'm talking about expressing gratitude to God, but then also I just overly express gratitude. And sometimes people are like, are you always cheerful? I'm like, no. Sometimes I have to express gratitude. I have to act myself into a feeling of being grateful. I have to say thank you so much. I truly appreciate you. What you did means the world to me. Even if I don't necessarily feel it, I have to be grateful. So why is that so important to us as we increase our capacity emotionally?
Yeah, I think it's an attitude, it's a perspective thing. Folks, if you don't have a practice of being intentional about thinking about what you're grateful for, as Neal described, he does it every day. I'm sure you've heard of people who have developed that habit where they do that every day. There's a lot of movements out there in our society today around that. And I think what it does is there's something about, when you think about what you're grateful for, it causes you to think about the good things that are happening in your life. And when you're thinking about the good things that are happening in your life, it causes you to be grateful. And when you're grateful, you're thinking about the good things that are happening in your life. And when you're thinking about the good things in your life, it causes you to be grateful. And so what happens is that it creates this cycle Neil, that it does strengthen us emotionally, because we can get worn down if we are only focused on all the bad stuff that's happening. I have a friend of mine that reminds me all the time. Well, he and I haven't been in touch. I should say reminded me when we were in touch a whole lot more. We used to work together. So almost every day he would remind me, and we went to church together also. And he used to say there's a whole lot more good happening than bad. And I think this practice of gratitude causes us to think about the good that's happening in our lives, and that's strengthening. It's encouraging. It fortifies us, and it becomes this cycle that gives us a positive stance, if you will. It gives us a positive a life stance, to be able to face whatever it is that we are facing, because we realize there's a whole lot more good happening than bad. That's my quick take.
And so that reminds us, as we're talking about number one, that first practical step, don't see yourself as a victim. It's impossible to have gratitude and victimhood occupy the same space at the same time. And so I think that's important for us as we put a bow on that. Stop seeing yourself as a victim, take responsibility, express gratitude. That's going to be key. Now, this is one where, Robin, we've been talking about this idea of emotional capacity growing. So before we even get into this next part, I have a saying, and I'm not sure where I heard it from, but I'm sure that I've melded it from years of study. But the saying is, my emotions are always valid, but they're not always beneficial, right? So I can have feelings, I can have emotions, but that does not make them beneficial to the circumstance, to the environment, to the people or corporation that I have. And so I know that there was a time when I would say, I have a right to feel this way. I have a right to be upset, to be frustrated. And I did, but it was not beneficial to the growth, to moving along. And I'm almost honored because I saw you write that down. So I like that. But I
I'm
want
gonna repeat it for our listeners here. That's a good one. So our emotions are always valid. So we're not saying, Neil is not saying to invalidate. Our emotions are always valid, but not always beneficial. That's a good one, Neil.
Hey, I'm telling you, and it's almost too good for it to be mine. So, like I said, I'm sure I heard it from somewhere. I just cannot give them just due. And here's why I started with this. If we want to take those practical steps, stop seeing ourselves as a victim, that was hard enough. Now, this next one is something, once again, we have not been trained or coached or instructed on how to do this. And so, control your emotions and process them quickly. Control your emotions. Don't let your emotions control you, and then process them quickly. What many of us, if we are being honest, what it has looked like, our training for that has been, just get over it, deal with it. And that's not what Dr. Maxwell is saying. So I would love to hear your take on this second practical step in developing emotional capacity: control your emotions and processing them quickly.
Yes, one of the things he had a quote in there by Brian Tracy that I want to start with. That he said, I wrote it down here. He said, psychologists have discovered that 95% of your emotions are determined, listen to this, folks, by the way you talk to yourself as you go through your day. 95% of your emotions, according to psychologists, they have discovered 95% of your emotions are determined by the way you talk to yourself as you go through your day. And so I think that's really practical right now. If we think about how we talk to ourselves, I used to say, boy,
Hey, so that's exactly where I was going to go, because I remember every time you talk about that self talk, that is your negative example of you
yes.
having to have an awakening and enlightening. Like, you silly dog, who says that? Go
Yes.
ahead.
Yes. And so now one of the things before, as I talk about this, I just want to introduce this concept that John talked about. We've talked about it before, but he talked about it now from an emotional capacity vantage point, and controlling your emotions is to review your day every day. Review your day at the end of the day. And I just want to highlight what he's suggesting that we ask as he does this every day. What happened in my world today? So you're reviewing what happened in the last 24 hours in your day, right? And you're just taking a few minutes at the end of the day and you're reviewing your day. And then you think about it and you said, what did I learn about myself today? What did I learn about myself today? If you think about it in the context of your emotions and controlling your emotions. How did I do? What happened in my world today? How did I do? What did I learn about myself today? The other one is, how I talk to myself. He literally talks to himself. What do you do with your observations, and what you say to yourself about them has a huge impact on you. And so that's the idea there is, what do I need to hear myself say?
So, Robin, can you pause right there? And so he doesn't ask, "What did I say to myself?" I know that in the process he's asking that, but can you just expound upon why asking the question, "What do I need to hear myself say?" Why that can impact so much of our life?
Yeah, because I think we need to be we need to acknowledge, first of all, that we actually control our emotions. We can look back and we can see somebody may have said something or done something that triggered something in us. So that's another thing we can see. We can discover a trigger. Hey, you know what? When in these sort of scenarios, or when this is said or done, it usually triggers an unhealthy response from me. It triggers any emotion that doesn't benefit others, right? It might be valid, but it doesn't benefit others, and I have to kind of keep that in check. So the first thing is that it makes us aware. So there's a whole lot. I just use an example of something that triggered us, but it could be so many different things that we discover about ourselves. So then what we say to ourselves now is just as important, because we could get down on ourselves, right? We could, boy, man, you are just,
Silly
terrible, man.
dog.
You silly dog, right? Wow. You're just like the people said, man. You're not going to be able to do anything. You can't even control yourself out there. So how we talk to ourselves is, we actually are directing ourselves, and we have to think about it, about how we would talk to somebody who's really special to us. Maybe it's our child, our son or daughter, or maybe it's our spouse, or maybe it's somebody that we work with, or somebody that we mentor, that we're trying to help, and they might have the same emotional reaction. How would we speak to them?
But Robin,
That's how we want to speak to ourselves, because that has a lot to do with our emotional capacity and how we control our emotions, what we say to ourselves. They're saying that 95% of our emotions is determined by the way you talk to yourself.
But Robin, so it sounds phooey, right? It sounds pie in the sky. I'm weird if I say encouraging things to myself. I am more than a conqueror. Heaven and earth align for opportunity to find myself. I am capable, right? I think about Pastor Joel Osteen and the power of I am. But then we think it is commonplace for us to say, "Man, I'm dumb. Man, I am ugly. Man, I can't do this," right? And so what would you just say, just quickly, to someone who is, because we know we speak to ourselves, we're the only one that's with us all day, every day, but they're still having that challenge of saying, "I don't even know what I should say to myself because it sounds like a lie." Because I've heard and I've spoken this truth over myself, that I'm incapable, that I'm not good enough, that I'm from the wrong place, that I am ugly. What do you say to them on, "Well, it sounds like a lie when I say I'm fearfully and wonderfully made, that I am capable"? What would you tell them?
Yeah, it's a good question, a good consideration. We are all perfectly imperfect people, right? All of us mess up. I would say, hey, Rob, you messed up. That's okay. We all mess up. Learn from it. What can you take away from this so that you can help yourself the next time, right? And so I would encourage myself. I think it comes back to, believe in yourself. If somebody really struggles with that, Neal, it needs to go even before that, and they do need to have, the exercise we talked about in one of our episodes. Write down
The 100
150
years.
positive qualities that you have. because you have them. And you might, if you don't believe that about yourself, and if you have to struggle to get to 150, then you need to do that exercise, right? There is Neil and I. Maybe you have to borrow the belief of somebody else. I would say be a part. Continue. I don't say this selfishly. Continue sticking with us on this podcast because we believe in your potential. You have amazing capabilities that are probably untapped.
Right.
And something that you shared earlier that we talked about a little bit is gratitude. I would say practice that. I want you to start thinking about what you can be grateful for. Think about that, right? What you can be grateful. That's going to help you to start having a more positive view of yourself. So what we're talking about here with this self-talk is to be encouraging, uplifting, inspiring, affirming to yourself. Acknowledging, right? Learning from the mistakes that you made, recognizing that we all make them, understanding that failure is not final. The mistake is all a part of it. We all make mistakes every single day. The difference between the person who makes something with the mistakes and someone who doesn't is the ones who do something about it. They continue progressing. They learn from it. And then they continue to try to change the next time. I can tell you, I shared with Neal this, this happens. I see myself have a trigger on the pickleball court from time to time. Still today, where I might, challenge somebody and it gets to the point where it's unhealthy. And I have to remind myself about that and encourage myself. And I have to go apologize. I would say that too, apologize. It's good for you to own up to the responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
But the point here, and I think I'm rambling now, Neal, the point here is that how we want to speak to ourselves in a manner that is encouraging and uplifting and that will cause us to, get back up and go after it again.
Okay, good stuff. So I do want you to round out, to go ahead and finish Dr. Maxwell, that what John Maxwell is doing. So he's reviewing his day by himself.
Yes.
He's thinking about himself, talking to himself. And then these next two are important. They're
Very
invaluable.
important.
Go ahead, sir.
So he directs himself. So the reflection, he says, has great value for learning, but much of that is lost if we don't decide what we should do with it. So we have to decide what we should do with what we've learned, right? How should I apply what I have learned? How should I apply what I have learned about myself on the pickleball court, right? What should I do differently? And in my case, it should be, don't even challenge the call. Just accept it. First of all, in most cases here, we're just talking about a game. We're not professionals. I'm not being paid for this. This is not about, do I want to be right, as we talked about in our last episode, or do I want to build relationship? Am I here to have fun and exercise and build camaraderie? So the learn for me there is don't even bother challenge. Just, or if you challenge, just ask, are you sure? And if they say yes, you just go on, right? Go on to the next point. So what have I learned? How should I apply it?
To know, how are you doing with that?
I'm getting better, much better. Getting much better. But, it could have been, I don't know, 3 weeks ago where I messed up one time. And it wasn't as bad, but it put a damper on the night. And I kind of said something in just to kind of just say something. I wasn't really challenging, but because I said it, they responded, and then it put a damper on the night. So I'm getting better, but 3 weeks ago, I still made the mistake. And so even in a case like that, what do I say to myself? Yeah, I can feel really bad about it. I think one thing that helped me is to acknowledge it. And so I apologize. Right. So and it's a two-way street. They had something to do with it too, but I apologize because I know better. And then I reminded myself again, hey, listen, see, that happened again. You don't even bother. You shouldn't even said that. And so the next thing now is the last one is to take action. Taking time to reflect and process emotions is wasted if it does not ultimately lead to positive action. And so the question is, will I follow through with action. And so, how do we control our emotions? We process them quickly. We reflect at the end of the day, every day, and we learn from what happened throughout our day. And then we take, we speak to ourselves
Mm-hmm.
in a kind way, but we also take the learn. What do we need to apply? And then we take action.
So all of this is so good because as we are having this conversation, I'm talking to myself even as I'm listening to you, and I have my mental checklist, right? How do I do with this? Where are my challenges? Where are my strengths? And this next one is, once again, practical steps that we can take to increasing our emotional capacity. This keep short accounts, right? So the whole idea where some people are going to say, I'll forgive, but I won't forget, right? So the list of their accounts are lengthy. It probably looks like, the naughty list and the nice list from Santa when he pulls it out and it just rolls and rolls and rolls and keeps going. And we can remember everything that has happened negatively to us when someone else hurt us. So my wife, whom I love, she says that one of the things that she loves about me and that frustrates her more than anything is the fact that, and this is no brag, but I keep really short accounts. If someone does something to me, once again, I just believe, and this is where we'll talk about a little later, but I just believe that that person is doing the best they can with what they have where they are at this time. And so that affords me the opportunity to keep really short accounts. And I will say this in defense of my wife. The reason why she loves it is because it's an enduring trait. But the only reason it frustrates her is because of her love for me, and she does not want to see me hurt repeatedly. It's not because she's a bad person. And so oftentimes I have kept short accounts only to have someone do something again. And now I have to say, I'm still going to forgive you. I'm just going to distance myself from that relationship or that environment. So when it comes
Yes.
to short accounts, Robin, man, I can't wait to hear what you've got for us.
Yes, sir. And I think we're probably going to be closing it down with this one. I mean, when I say closing it down, we're coming to the end of the show here. But I think I don't know if it was King Solomon or King David who said it, but he said, don't go to bed angry at your wife or your husband. Don't go to bed angry. Have you been there? I've been there, Neal, where I have gone to bed angry. And I think the point of it all is that we carry baggage around. If we don't deal with these conflicts quickly, like you're suggesting that you are doing, then what happens is that it weighs on us. Like there are times, if I can be honest with our listeners, there are times where I have gone to bed not talking to my wife, not kissing my wife, and that the next day I wake up with that, and I go into work or whatever it is that I'm about. And you best believe that that affects me, who I am, how I show up to the people that I'm now interacting with. And, some people say, leave your stuff at home, but I don't, I am Robin. Wherever I go, it's Robin, right? And so the point of that is if we don't deal with those things quickly, that we bring this baggage around with us, we need a tremendous amount of emotional capacity to deal with the adversity, the failures, and all the stuff we talked about as leaders that we're going to face every day. And if we're carrying around other baggage too from something that happened in the past that we haven't dealt with, then it's also going to put more strain on us. So I think it's a valuable practice that we can try to do. I have not been the best at it, as I'm sharing with you. Full transparency, something with me I've shared with you also, Neal. I'm sharing with you, our listeners today, is that I just naturally don't like confrontation. So sometimes when there's conflict, my tendency is to shy away from addressing it. And so I have had to learn and be more intentional about this value that Neal is sharing here. The concept here is that if I don't face it, if I don't address it, it's going to continue. And what happens when it continues is that it festers. And so it doesn't go away. That's what I have to remind myself with, is that it doesn't go away. And so if I don't deal with it, usually, you know what happens, Neal? Is it gets worse. It builds up. And then I might find one or two things that might add to it. because based upon something that somebody did or said, that it adds to it now. And then all of a sudden it might get to a point where it has to come out.
Yeah.
And that's an unhealthy way of dealing with.
So that reminds me, I was having a conversation with one of my mentors. I think I was probably in my early teens. And he says, Neil, just because a woman doesn't admit she's pregnant doesn't mean the baby still isn't going to be born. Right. And so this is where I look at that. And so when he said it, I was like, well, maybe we could just ignore this. Maybe. And that's when he came with that idea. And so since then, I have said, what have I not admitted? What have I not addressed, hoping that it's going to go away, knowing that at some point it's going to have to be birthed, it's going to come to light, that it's going to have to be dealt with. So, Robin, here's what I want to do with your permission, sir. I believe that the idea that this topic of developing emotional capacity is so important to our audience, to us as leaders, that we would underserve them and us if we did not finish this topic in the following episode. So we're going to bring a part 2. And part of the reason is because we're only on the third practical step. It is our goal. It is our purpose to go with you on this journey, and we would leave you ill-equipped to develop emotional capacity if we stopped after 3, especially since Robin has some personal experience with number 6. Become comfortable with discomfort. So I can't wait to hear Robin share and myself share, and maybe even spark some thought with you. When have you had to become comfortable with discomfort? I know Robin just alluded to not liking confrontation, but here's my ask of each and every one of you, ladies and gentlemen. It is to sit with this topic, deal with those things, admit, address, and then maybe ask yourself, how are you first handling your emotions? Before we can increase our emotional capacity, we must be aware of where we currently are. And then it's going to take intentional steps, intentional decisions, and actions to progress so that we can be high road leaders. Robin, what do you have for the people before we go, sir?
Yes, definitely. I agree. We should follow up, and but we have shared some practical steps for us today where we can release unneeded stress, because we need to have high emotional capacity. It's a part of leadership, and we just want to encourage you that there are things that you can do to be in the place, because especially today in our society, it's needed. There are a lot of people out there that are hurting and are at a place emotionally where they are actually dysfunctional in their behavior. And it's going to depend even more upon us to strengthen our capacity to be able to help and to lead others to a better way and a better place. And we're glad that you're here with us, and we're in this together, as we always say. And you know, what Neil and I are excited about is that we add value to you, so that you can add value and empower others. So we add value to empower you so that you can add value and empower others. So this multiplication with us together can actually make a difference in our society. So we're glad you're with us for the journey. And please share your comments and your feedback, or anything in this regard that you want to add to this episode. Maybe there is a thought that you have that can add to make this even better. We welcome that as well.
And we're also going to ask you to share this episode with someone that you want to maybe expose the idea of developing emotional capacity to, or someone that has impacted you by their example, by someone who says, yes, I am no longer seeing myself as a victim. I'm going to take responsibility for my life. And as Robin mentioned, we want to hear from you. So in the show notes on any platform that you're watching this, you are going to be able to see how to leave those comments. We care about you. We're here for you because we have a purpose to fulfill. And as always, Robin and I want to remind you that we love you, God loves you, and there's nothing you can do about it. And until the next time we see you or you see us, we're right there with you. Bye.